Today, we're going on a really focused trip through our research, looking at a quiet giant in European manufacturing, Portugal. Our mission is to understand the structural shifts, the competitive positioning of its life sciences and biotech manufacturing sector. It's a country that often flies under the radar when you think of global pharma. The data shared tells a surprisingly powerful story, one about exports, specialization, innovation, and sustainability. And today, I'm joined by three experts to help me unpack it. Here to talk about Portugal's competitive advantages and current trends in the country is Girisha.
Thank you, Noah. And you are spot on when describing Portugal as a quiet giant. Really, the question we need to answer for you is why Portugal? This is a relatively small country, right? But the AICEP shows it's a massive and rapidly expanding export engine. We're talking about real scale here. Total exports for this sector are projected to hit about 4 billion this year, and that's reaching 183 different markets around the globe. For context, Portugal's total exports across the country exceed 130 billion, which highlights just how significant life sciences have become as a high-value export segment.
That's a huge footprint for any nation, let alone one of Portugal's size.
And if you break that 4 billion figure down, the real core of the engine is pharmaceutical preparations. That's making up about 3.3 billion of the total. So, the sector isn't really designed to serve its own domestic market first. It's built for global trade.
So we're dealing with a global player that has, from the ground up, built its base around serving external demand. And this growth isn't just organic, is it? It's being pushed by these three huge global pressures. We're seeing rising EU demand for complex medicines, the critical need for supply chain resilience after the pandemic, and maybe most importantly, these new non-negotiable compliance and sustainability rules that are just completely reshaping where manufacturing capital goes.
Exactly. Let's start with that foundational base because the infrastructure itself is the first layer of its competitive advantage. The AICEP really highlights that this manufacturing base is fundamentally export-driven and globally integrated.
And that's the key differentiator right there. I mean, if a firm is already deeply embedded in global supply chains, according to demanding markets like the EU and the US, they've already done the heavy lifting. The logistics, the quality control, it's all baked in.
Yes, the whole system is proven, and that leads directly to the stability factor that international clients are really looking for. Portugal operates fully within EU regulatory frameworks. That means seamless alignment with European Medicines Agency standards through its own regulator Infarmed.
Okay, but when a multinational is scouting locations, why does that regulatory alignment mean so much more than just a tick box? What's the actual business impact?
It just drastically lowers what we call qualification friction.
Qualification friction?
Yeah. So if you're a large pharma company from, say, the US or Asia, and you're looking for a secure European manufacturing hub, you don't have to worry about unique national standards. You're dealing with consistent, predictable, EU-wide good manufacturing practice GMP compliance, which provides instant credibility. It just removes a huge amount of risk and time from the process.
And time in drug manufacturing is always money, always.
Which supports that whole move towards geographic diversity and resilience. We talk a lot about single site risk, and the big CDMOs, or contract development and manufacturing organizations, are actively trying to mitigate that. I mean, look at a major player like Hovione, headquartered in Portugal. They've got multi-regional operations in Portugal, Ireland, China, and the US. This isn't just about getting closer to markets, it's about balancing risk. If a disruption hits one region, they can shift supply or scale up production in another. That's a non-negotiable for multinationals now.
Okay, let's pivot to the core engine of this growth because stability is necessary, but it's the specialization that really makes it unique. The major structural opportunity here is the surging demand for outsourced manufacturing. Portugal ranks first in R&D incentives for indirect and direct government support among EU countries, and also ranks fourth in new to market and new to firm products among EU countries. Thank you to Girisha for coming in today to talk about trends and competitive advantages that Portugal has in our world. Continuing on with our deep dive, I have brought another guest here who is very familiar with the community regarding big pharma, Portugal specifically, and is also familiar with Hovione's spray drying technology. So welcome, Hunter.
Hello, Noah, and thank you for inviting me. Portugal really is the best place in Europe to work in research and development, and even has one of the highest number of doctoral and graduate students working in R&D. We know that big pharma is facing this constant triple squeeze: time, cost, and complexity. They need to move faster, manage these soaring R&D budgets, and they're working with much more complex molecules, especially ones with solubility issues that require very specialized handling. This pressure means they're leaning heavily on these CDMOs for everything, from early stage development to commercial production. CDMOs are a contract development and manufacturing organization and is a company that helps pharmaceutical and biotech firms develop, scale, and manufacture drugs for clinical trials and commercial sale.
And the marketing data backs this up. The European pharma R&D outsourcing market is projected to almost double by 2032. That's a decade of guaranteed structural demand right there.
And that structural demand is the foundation, sure, but the real question is how Portugal captures its share. And they are absolutely not competing on mass production volume or just being cheap. That field is way too crowded. Portugal's edge is in high value modalities in addressing these really technical bottlenecks that even major pharma companies struggle with internally.
So what does that technical niche look like in practice? Can you paint a picture of what they're actually solving?
We are talking about deep technical science. Think particle engineering, manipulating the physical characteristics of a drug, or dealing with specialty APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients that are just difficult to handle. A lot of it comes down to improving solubility. Many promising new drugs fail not because they won't work in theory, but because the body just can't absorb them.
So if a drug doesn't dissolve properly, it can't get into your bloodstream. It's basically useless.
Exactly. And Portugal is specializing in the manufacturing science to make those drugs bioavailable. That level of competence creates a defensible niche, a competitive moat. Our research makes it clear that complexity itself functions as that moat.
But why does solving a complex problem raise the switching cost so much for the customer?
Because the manufacturing process is integral to the drug itself. If a formulation is tricky, say it needs a specific particle size or you need a high temperature process, that entire process has to be rigorously validated by regulators like the FDA or EMA. If you try to move that production somewhere else, you just move the recipe. You don't have to spend millions and maybe years revalidating the whole entire thing. So once a Lex process is validated as specialized CDMO in Portugal, the customer as well, they're essentially locked in.
That makes the expertise incredibly sticky.
Yes, it does. It makes the investment in capability far more valuable than just raw capacity.
Let's look at a concrete example of this. For instance, Hovion's expansion into spray drying.
Spray drying is the perfect illustration. It's a very high tech. It's just they put $100 million investment into expanding this capacity, including doubling their output in the US site in New Jersey. And the technology itself is key for drug development right now.
Can you explain spray drying simply? Why is that specific technique so important for these modern drug molecules?
Okay, so when you have a drug that's poorly soluble, it won't dissolve in water, or the stomach spray drying takes the active ingredient and dissolves it in the solvent with the polymer. This whole mixture is then sprayed through a tiny nozzle into a heated chamber, then instantly evaporates the solvent. What you're left with is a fine powder, an amorphous, solid dispersion, and this new form makes the drug significantly more soluble, which dramatically improves how well your body can absorb it.
So by scaling up this expensive advanced capability, these Portuguese headquartered firms aren't just building another factory. They're directly solving one of the most common hurdles in new drug development. It reinforces their position as a high-value partner.
It connects their capability directly to a massive commercial opportunity.
Now, in the spirit of a true deep dive, we have to look past the success stories. We have to analyze the constraints. The learner profile demands we understand the competitive tensions. So let's run a quick SWOT analysis on this sector.
And that balance is essential. So starting with the weaknesses, our research points to two big ones. First is the limited domestic market scale. As we said, it's export driven. That's a strength, but it also means the firms are more exposed to global economic volatility. They can't fall back on a large home market.
And the second weakness is one we're seeing across all European manufacturing right now: talent depth.
Absolutely. Portugal has excellent universities, but the pool of highly specialized talent, We're talking senior process engineers, technicians who can manage these high complexity APIs and particle engineering sites. That pool is smaller than in, say, Germany or Switzerland. Scaling up these facilities requires very seasoned experts, and the competition for them is fierce and expensive.
So growth is kind of capped by their ability to either recruit that talent globally or develop it internally.
Precisely. Now let's look at the threats. This is where the competitive competition comes in hard.
You mentioned Ireland, Germany, Italy. How exactly do these larger EU hubs compete with Portuguese specialization?
They compete mainly on scale, tax incentives, and just historical momentum. Ireland, for example, has offered very attractive corporate tax regimes for decades. It has a long history with US pharma investment. Germany offers a colossal scale and it has a much deeper talent pool. So this means Portugal is in a perpetual state of having to differentiate. They always have to compete on capability and reliability, not just price. The minute they lose that technical edge, they risk being undercut by bigger players. It's a constant pressure to innovate just to stay in the game.
Okay, but what about the opportunities? Where's the upside?
The opportunities are really twofold. They stem from market demand and geopolitical shifts. First, that continued structural growth and specialized CDMO demand, complexity isn't going away. It's accelerating. That plays right into Portugal's niche. Second, and this is crucial, is supply chain diversification within Europe. The fragility we saw in global supply chains has caused firms to look for stable, politically secure, high-quality manufacturing nodes outside the traditional Central European cluster.
And Portugal, with its stable institutions, full EU regulatory alignment, and proven export infrastructure, it fits that bill perfectly. It's a complementary node taking on the high-tech work that the mega-scale facilities might not focus on.
Exactly. It's about an integral, stable piece of diversified European manufacturing strategy.
Okay, let's shift gears completely. Let's talk about what is rapidly becoming the new frontier of competitive differentiation, ESG, or environmental, social, and governance performance. It's reshaping contracts, investment decisions, everything. According to the European Commission's 2025 Innovation Scoreboard, Portugal ranks sixth in CO2 productivity. This is essentially a measure of how much GDP the country earns per unit of CO2 emitted, and Portugal is 38% above the average. Not only is the country excelling in distributing new products into markets all over the world, but they are also producing products sustainably. Let me give a quick thank you to Hunter for coming in to talk about Hovion's spray drying and SWOT analysis on this sector. But here to talk about ESG in Portugal, please welcome Palmer.
Thank you for having me on Deep Dive, and I am excited to be here. We know that ESG is no longer just some optional window dressing. It's a fundamental operational requirement, and it's being driven by two parallel forces. You have the external demand, like regulators, like the EU, and massive customers who now require detailed, audible performance data from all their suppliers.
And then there's the internal drive, which hits the bottom line.
Exactly, internal accountability. It's about mitigating operational risks, reducing waste, cutting energy costs. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is very energy and water intensive, so reducing your environmental footprint often means big long-term cost savings.
So focusing on the environmental metrics, what are the leading players in Portugal actually doing on climate?
There's a strong public commitment to targeting greenhouse gas GHG reductions aligned with things like the Paris Agreement. Hovion, for example, has publicly committed to setting science-based targets for GHG reduction, but a really effective strategy is their power sourcing. Our research shows that several manufacturers, Hovion included, have shifted to purchasing 100% certified renewable electricity for their manufacturing sites.
That one move is a huge quantifiable reduction in their carbon footprint. They can immediately report to customers that renewable sourcing becomes a commercial selling point, not just a sustainability project.
It's a market differentiator, but the E is only one part of the puzzle. We really have to discuss governance and compliance because this is where a massive regulatory change is landing. We need to talk about the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD.
This sounds like a paperwork exercise, but I get the feeling it's much, much deeper than that. How does CSRD change how firms operate?
It changes everything from the top down. CSRD is not just expanded reporting, it mandates a rigorous integrated approach to sustainability information that requires external auditing, just like financial data, and critically introduces the concept of double materiality.
Double materiality?
Yes, it means companies have to report not just on how sustainability issues affect the company, that's financial materiality, but also how the company's own operations affect people and the environment. That impacts materiality. For a manufacturer, this means reporting on everything from emissions and waste to social metrics like working conditions, supply chain oversight, diversity.
Wow, that requires deep data collection, often across complex international supply chains. It's a huge operational lift. It forces transparency on things that were maybe only loosely reported before.
It demands new internal systems, new expertise, greater oversight, especially of the SMG factors. And this transparency is then validated externally by the third-party assessments like EcoVadis ratings. So if you're seeking a major CDM contract, a high EcoVadis score validates your credibility. In this industry, a strong ESG performance is rapidly becoming a barrier to entry.
As we're wrapping up our talk on the quiet biotech manufacturing that is Portugal, let me bring everyone back into the conversation again and ask, what does all of this mean for you, the listener? We've covered stability, specialization, the talent squeeze, and now this regulatory squeeze from ESG.
The key takeaway, I think, is that Portugal's life science sector is a successful global player because it made a strategic choice years ago. Focuses on high margins and specialized CDMO services anchor itself firmly within that rigorous, stable EU regulatory framework. They've basically traded mass volume for technical excellence and reliability.
The real story here is this incredible convergence of two forces: high-tech manufacturing specialization, solving problems like particle engineering, and meeting these massive new regulatory demands like CSRD compliance. These firms are operating on a global stage where the definition of quality has expanded. It's far beyond just GMP now. It includes verifiable sustainability and governance, and that creates a unique tension. They are specialists, which requires a huge upfront capital for facilities like spray dryers, but they're also facing these immediate costly compliance demands, forcing parallel investments.
And that sets up our final provocative question perfectly. Since these firms must be capability led and their growth requires this deliberate, highly capital intensive planning, how will the urgent need for new sustainability reporting, infrastructure, and facility upgrades, all driven by evolving EU GMP and CSRD expectations, how will that impact the speed at which these specialized Portuguese firms can actually scale up to meet the surging global outsourcing demand?
It's a scale versus compliance race against the clock. Definitely something to mull over. Well, I appreciate all of you guys taking the time to come join us and help others learn about the importance Portugal plays in the life sciences and biotech manufacturing sector. And I'm sure our listeners appreciate it as well. Thank you.